Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, the Greens, Sinn Féin, People Before Profit, as well as Social Democrats and Labour TDs have all declared that Ireland should lower the voting age to 16. An idea so bad it's almost difficult to put into words. But let's try anyway, since you won't find much opposition to it in the rest of the media or from any of our political parties. This is Ben Scallan and you're watching Gript Media. Basically, the entire Irish political spectrum agrees that children should be allowed to vote, and I wish I was joking. Micheál Martin first expressed his support for this idea initially back in February of 2020. As reported in the Irish Examiner, Micheál Martin visited the school this morning ahead of a planned canvass of the Kerry town. He was joined by Fianna Fáil election candidate Norma Foley, a former town mayor and an English teacher in the school. Mr. Martin took questions from TY students who asked him about the youth vote and gender balance in politics. When asked by a student about encouraging more young people to use their vote, Mr. Martin said, "Personally, I would like to reduce the voting age to 16. Since then, the idea seems to have gained traction among other parties, with Sinn Féin's Fintan Warfield tabling a motion last week to achieve that same goal in the Seanad.
In conclusion, the Taoiseach has said that he supports lowering the voting age to 16. We understand from reports in the press that Fianna Fáil want this on the agenda. This is necessary, I think, prior to any referendum, that we legislate for local and European elections to lower the voting age, to show our support and to thank you, Minister. We have, our Leader, we have retabled our Vote at 16 bill, which would be debated at committee stage. And thank you for doing that, Leader.
And bear in mind, this is not just Fintan Warfield's personal opinion as an individual, this is Sinn Féin party policy. It's on their website right now as we speak, as of the 12th of March 2021 this year. To be fair to Fintan, on the topic of teenagers voting, he is an expert in immature politics himself, so I'm sure he and his new voters would have a lot in common. Not to be left out, Fine Gael's Neil Richmond took to TikTok to say that the government are committed to introducing votes for 16-year-olds for the local and European elections, adding that there may be a referendum for letting teens vote in general elections, presidential elections and even referenda.
Yeah, so the government is committed to introducing votes for 16-year-olds for the local and European elections in 2024. Unfortunately, to do it for general elections, presidential elections or referenda will require a constitutional amendment and indeed a referendum. That's not being ruled out, but the idea is to get it in place for the local and European elections first, and then hopefully, yeah, we'll see it reduced to 16 across the board, as has been done by many European countries with great success.
So there you have it, the three biggest parties in Ireland, including the so-called opposition party of Sinn Féin, all support extending the franchise to 16-year-olds. Not only that, but even the smaller parties have rowed in with their support. As the Greens have said already, as the Vote at 16 bill goes through the committee stage in Seanad Éireann, our equality spokesperson Una Power outlines why we support lowering the voting age.
The Green Party supports reducing the voting age from 18 to 16. By reducing it to 16, we instill the habit of voting early on. People get used to it before they move away to university, to work, or go to travel.
People Before Profit lists reducing the voting age to 16 as a policy in their 2020 election manifesto from last year. Or take Labour's Aidan O'Riordan, who said, "Last thought, can't wait to give the vote to 16 and 17-year-olds in Ireland. It would inject an exciting dynamic to politics here." And last but not least, Gary Gannon of the Social Democrats. Well done, Owen Gilroy, hearing fantastic reports on your campaign to lower the voting age to 16. So to recap, that's Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Sinn Féin, the Greens, People Before Profit, as well as Labour and the Social Democrats TDs, all who have supported lowering the voting age to 16. In other words, they all agree. There's not one major party in Ireland that you can point to who stood up against this. Which means it must be a good idea, right? I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Well, let's put this in perspective for a moment. In Ireland, a person is eligible for child benefit up until the age of 18. The key part of that phrase being child. In the eyes of the Irish state, anyone under 18 is deemed to be a child, and their parents receive financial assistance based on the assumption that they are still at home being taken care of by their mammy and daddy. An assumption that is both reasonable and usually true. You can't join the Irish military until you are 18 years old. You can't drink alcohol until you are 18 years old. You can't get married until you're 18 years old. In fact, under Irish criminal law, you are legally considered a child in court if you commit a crime before that age. If a 17-year-old stabs someone, they cannot be tried as an adult because they don't fit the legal definition of an adult. And nobody is proposing changing those laws. Even Ireland's age of consent is 17. If you were to have sex with a 16-year-old in this country, a court would rightly find you guilty of sex with a child. You can't drive a car until you are 17 either. And this is not disputed by anyone. 16-year-olds can't be drafted in wartime, they aren't entitled to full minimum wage in employment, they are protected in jobs by special laws regarding child labour that don't apply to adults. For example, adults can work a maximum work week of 48 hours, while 16 and 17-year-olds can only work 40 hours. The list goes on and on. Everything about our society points to 16 and 17-year-olds being less capable than a fully mature adult, and consequently we extend them both less responsibilities and less rights when it comes to decisions of huge importance, like for example voting in national elections. What this effectively means is that we now have almost all parties in the state advocating for giving literal children the right to vote. We'd effectively be saying that a 16-year-old does not have the mental maturity to get married or drink alcohol, but apparently they do have the maturity to decide the future of the entire nation through elections. They're not allowed to legally drive a car because they'd be too irresponsible behind the wheel, but they can vote on referenda that will permanently alter the constitution of our country for generations to come. Does this sound like a good idea to anyone? More importantly, you'd be giving teenagers the power to decide society's fate despite them being totally dependent on their parents in close to 100% of cases. How many 16-year-olds do you know that provide for themselves and live independently? Well, almost none. I'm sure it exists, but it is exceedingly rare. What this effectively means is that young teen voters could vote for, say, higher taxes and would suffer no personal consequences of that, considering the vast majority of 16-year-olds don't work or pay tax. They could vote for a pro-war party, knowing that they won't get drafted if a conflict breaks out. And before someone says, sure, that would never happen, it's so unlikely, it doesn't matter if it's likely or not. These are examples of things that could happen. If COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's that we cannot foresee what crises or situations might crop up in the future. And who knows what they might vote for in 5 or 10 years' time. It's totally unquantifiable. They could vote for almost anything, no matter how poorly thought out it was, and it wouldn't affect them, because once again, they're children. And bear in mind, once you give teenagers the right to vote, it would be basically impossible to remove it. How could you take away a right once it's been given? Whatever election or referendum we had to revoke the right, they'd be voting in it too. If God forbid we ever implemented this and then 5 years down the line we realized, wait a minute, this was a horrible mistake, it's too late at that point. The damage has been done and it can't be reversed. To be honest, since we're already crossing the Rubicon of letting children vote, why stop at 16? Why can't the 15-year-old vote, since their rights and responsibilities are basically the same? Or what about a 14-year-old? Or why not 12 or 10? There used to be a cutoff here, i.e. that we only allowed the adult citizen population to cast ballots, but since we've done away with that now apparently, we might as well just go mental, right? I mean, how is letting a 9 or a 10-year-old vote any more preposterous than what these politicians are proposing? The arguments that they make for this policy could just as easily be applied to a child of an even younger age. In fact, it's a bit strange that people like Aidan O'Riordan want to give 16-year-old boys the right to vote, considering he has claimed that boys' schools are a major contributing factor to domestic violence and says that a, quote, toxic male culture creates a warped sense of power in the minds of young men. So in other words, he thinks that young men are violent, dominating abusers in waiting, and yet he wants thousands more of them voting every year in our elections and referenda. Something tells me he hasn't quite thought this through, like most policies that he promotes. It's worth asking how much of this voting at 16 thing has to do with political grooming in the Irish school system, where many parties in Ireland want liberal social propaganda pumped into the minds of students. It's almost like stacking the electorate with more malleable and impressionable voters who you've already done a number on. But that's a different video altogether. At a certain point, you have to wonder if these people even proofread their own policies before blurting them out, let alone seriously consider their implications for society. Of all the dangerously stupid crap that's wafted out of the halls of Leinster House in modern times, this has got to be up there as one of the most daft and potentially catastrophic. God help us if this plan ever becomes a reality. Please like and share this video, and if you enjoyed it, please consider signing up for a monthly donation via the link on screen to help us produce more content like this. Alternative media like Gript needs all the assistance it can get, and every donation goes a long way. As always, thanks for watching.